As a bank that focuses on business, we work with business leaders all day, every day. We have a front row seat to what's working and what has potential. The First Business Bank podcast is dedicated to sharing insights to help you work better, smarter, and faster to achieve your goals. Let's get into the show.
Hello, I'm Mark Meloy, CEO of First Business Bank. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the First Business Bank podcast. Today, we are discussing current marketing trends and best practices that business leaders should consider as they navigate changing buyer behavior. I'm joined by a distinguished group of marketing and advertising experts, and I'll have each of them introduce themselves to kick off our discussion today. Ed, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Peck with Filament. We're a full-service marketing agency based here in Madison, Wisconsin, focused on agriculture. We work with companies and clients around the globe, actually, in helping reach producers and anyone touching the food system.
Thanks. Fritz?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me today. I'm Fritz Gressner. I'm the president and founder of Brandgarten. We're a locally based company, but we work with global brands as well as local companies and local nonprofits. And we do market research and brand strategy. And an easy way to think about that is we simply help brands and companies tell their story better.
Thanks. Sara?
Hey guys, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me join in this podcast. I'm really excited to be a part of this. My name is Sara Kiley. I'm the digital operations manager at Midwest Family, and we're a company that helps other businesses build comprehensive marketing plans. I also have over 15 years of experience in traditional marketing, especially radio, because we also own 8 radio stations in Madison.
Thanks. Tom?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tom Dott. I'm a commercial banking relationship manager with First Business Bank. Been in commercial banking for about 30 plus years, specializing in closely held family businesses, and really excited to be a part of the conversation.
Thanks. Well, let's get started. Fritz, I'm going to point the first question at you. Could you just kind of get us started here as we kick this off with your perspective of trends and best practices, maybe prior to the pandemic, and highlight how things have changed?
Sure. Well, let me start with things that haven't changed. I mean, marketing's always been about finding and engaging customers to get them to buy your product or service. And even prior to the pandemic, things were changing pretty dramatically. I think marketing has gotten much, much more complex as marketing directors now have to manage social media and SEO and inbound marketing and customer experience management. So it's become much more complex. And I think the pandemic really just accelerated that. All of a sudden now, you can't have your person-to-person contact as much. So much of it went digital. So it's really shifted dramatically. If you just look at our company, we would do a lot of market research previously, where we would try to recruit respondents to a central facility, say in Chicago or New York or London. And then we would go and do those interviews and then report out on the findings. We can't do that anymore, and we don't do it anymore. All our interviews now are done virtually through Zoom. And one nice benefit of that for us is I don't have to travel nearly as much. And we're able pretty much to do everything we used to do. Maybe it's not perfect, but even facilitating workshops, we've managed to figure out a way to do that online now versus in person.
Good, thanks. Ed, are you seeing a change in the types of projects your clients are working on or asking about?
Well, I would echo what Fritz said as far as a lot of things really haven't changed. Maybe some things have accelerated. And specific to your question, Mark, I think what we have seen is definitely more of a shift towards ways to reach a specific customer, more fine-tuned target marketing, and really working with those customers, sort of replacing the personal touch that we've lost through COVID with reduced travel, reduced events and activities. So the biggest change is coming from a lot of those more expected interactions, trade show events, meetings with customer groups, et cetera, just finding different ways to communicate with them. So a lot more digital, a lot more social marketing, and then trying to get a little creative with one-on-ones.
Good, thanks. Sara, talk about digital versus traditional marketing channels and tactics. What are you seeing that's surprising to you right now?
Yeah, so I'll first kind of initially started talking about how there's so many options and there's so many different marketing choices for everybody out there, right? Every year we constantly hear the choices to where you want to advertise is more than it's ever been before. There's hundreds, thousands of options. But I think all of the tools, whether you're looking at traditional or digital, all of the tools can be beneficial, can be successful. What it comes down to is really who are you trying to target and who are you trying to reach? And if you understand that customer and who your client is, whether it's traditional, digital, it can be successful for you. But it's so important, I think, that you understand exactly who you're targeting and not just, I want to reach adults, 25 to 54. Where can you find those people? Where are they looking? What social networks are they on? What pages do they follow? Things like that. If you're really digging deep into who your customer is, any tool that you choose, radio, online, whatever it is, can be successful. And I would say when talking about things that I see that are surprising, I think there's still some businesses out there that aren't understanding or really taking advantage of the benefit of their website and their online presence. And websites have become way more than just, I just need something up there, right? It needs to be user friendly. Your marketing messages all need to match. If you're saying one thing over here in traditional and TV or wherever you're sending the message, let's make sure that it exists within your website, within your social networks, so everything is consistent. We need a lot of consistency so people hear the message, they hear it multiple times, and then that's when your clients are going to react and reach out to you when they need you for your service or product.
Yeah, those are great points. Thanks for making that. Tom, you're working with a wide range of companies and see how they're doing business. What sticks out to you in terms of what business people are thinking these days and kind of paying attention to?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think through the pandemic and when everything changed and people were shutting down and they were closed, they were open. I think what a lot of it's now come down to is people really focusing on maintaining their relationships and doing that in different ways. And that's where I think marketing and branding is so mission critical, especially now. Is they want their customers to know we're still here. We're stronger than ever. We're here. We're ready to serve you, but they still need to be visible and they still need to be relative to what's going on out there. And so I think more so now than ever, it's just that presence of knowing that you're there and not, not curling up in a ball in the corner and hiding, as opposed to being out there in the forefront and letting people know that, hey, we're still here. We're ready for you and we want to take care of you.
I'd like to just add on to Tom's comments. We're definitely finding with our clients, more than ever, the customer wants to know that they're there, wants to know that they can believe in something. I think if we all learned anything this year, it's that day-to-day unpredictable things are happening. We don't know what's going to come next. And so we're managing ourselves the best that we can. And if you think about, as Sara said, about putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you want to talk to and understanding how they're feeling about things that truly are out of their control right now, they want as many other things on the other side of what they can rely upon, and brands and companies and products and services that you can continuously deliver on and remind them that you're there for them, remind them that they can trust you to provide the same quality or the same service, is more important now than ever. At least that's what we're finding with our clients, and that's really what we're working towards in our 2021 marketing plans.
Mark, if I could just build on that, I think that it's more important now than ever, as Ed's saying, to help your customer know how you feel about them. I heard a really good story recently. A friend of mine had their dog pass away, which, if you've ever had a dog, you know how sad that can be. They're part of the family. And this brand had been sending out dog food over the mail. They had ordered a subscription for dog food, and when the subscription stopped, the woman sent the company a note saying, we don't need it anymore. My dog passed away. And a couple days later, they received a bouquet of flowers saying, we're so sorry that your dog passed away. Now, you could say, well, why would a company do that? They don't have their customer anymore because they don't have a dog. But I can tell you that she's planning on buying another dog. And I think that she's a lifelong fan now of this brand that in this time really took the effort to make her feel like they really cared about her.
And I would add, my guess too is that after she received that, she probably posted an online review about how wonderful that company is. And I think
Exactly.
Businesses really need to focus on that's the customer service. It's people do, unfortunately, you're going to hear more negative things than you are positive, but that's so far above and beyond that people will take online and review it, and then go on Facebook and tell all their friends like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. And so you those are very, very important. You'll get so much more out of that than whatever it costs that company to send that out to her. They're going to get so much more out of that.
Yeah, and that's the plus factor of it, in the sense that you do what you need to do to deliver on your product or service, but every time you can plus it, you just set yourself apart that much further from everybody else.
Yeah, those are all great points, you guys. That's really, there's so much more information that companies have about their customers by virtue of how they interact, how that customer interacts with them. And it's incredible how it goes down to some of the finest details, as you perfectly described here. Fritz, what trends are you seeing in terms of types of projects and technology used and or communication channels?
Well, when the pandemic started, we had, branding is an easy thing to sort of put on hold for a little bit. So we suffered a little bit. But in the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen business come back pretty strong, in that companies that are surviving and doing well still understand they need to get consumer insights. They need a clear brand strategy, and they need to figure out their brand architecture, for example. And sometimes when things are a little slow for companies, it's a good time to take a step back and say, have we defined our values really well? Have we defined our brand story really well? But one thing we're getting a lot of requests for recently is to help them map the customer experience, to map and figure out ways that along that customer journey, you can make, at the moments that matter, you can do something that really stands out and really makes you memorable. I think that's something that's really hot right now. But one thing, we worked with a company this last year that did direct selling. So they would go into homes and they would sell cookware in little shows. So they figured out that, some of their folks had already figured out that through YouTube, they could be doing these online webinars. And when the pandemic hit, you can't go into people's homes and do a cooking show anymore. So it very quickly, they figured out that we got to push hard into this new opportunity to do webinars online. And you can imagine that the potential is huge. If instead of seeing maybe 4 or 5 people in a cooking show in their home, now you can see 1,000 or more people in your webinar with potential sale. So I talked to the company president recently, and he said, business has never been better, if you can imagine that. And part of the tailwind they had is that cooking at home, home cooking is back in because we can't go out to restaurants anymore. But it's one example of a company that's really thrived during this pandemic.
I'll add to that too. Fritz, you brought up kind of the customer journey. And it is important because we're definitely seeing a push with Midwest Family of trying to map that out and understand how you get the customer from not knowing anything about you to becoming a raving fan, and then they share that with their friends. So, but it's very important not to jump from we don't know anything about you to we expect you to be a raving fan and buy our product and spend all this money. There's touch points in between that you can set up with your marketing to make your customer comfortable with what you're trying to do. And so you need to build that up, and you need to understand it as a business, how people are getting where you want them to go. And that's what your marketing should kind of revolve around, is that path that they need to take.
A situation very similar to the story that Fritz shared of a client of ours that is in the high-end processed meat sales business. Prior to the pandemic, their largest market was high-end steakhouses and restaurants. And of course, with the pandemic, that immediately changed. And not only did that change for their customers, but it changed for their distribution system, their priority market, et cetera. We were able to help them pivot by getting the messages into homes with more people ordering in food, ordering online, being more willing to buy frozen beef from a different location than their local grocery store. However, we had to be very careful and think bigger picture of what's the world going to be like as COVID starts settling down. And we certainly did not want to alienate those restaurants and top chefs that were loyal followers. And so we have evolved to engaging them, keeping those chefs, those restaurants, their brands top of mind by sharing their expertise in a do-it-yourself at home sort of version, knowing that those chefs will never be surpassed by an amateur home cook, but they can help those home cooks make a better meal, and at the same time say, when pandemic is over, I'm willing to go to that restaurant because I really got a great brand affiliation for that, and I want them to cook for me on a special night. And early indications are that that's really working. Of course, it's too soon to know until we're much further along in the COVID pandemic recovery than we are today.
Hey, Mark, one thing I'm just going to quick add is that I think as it relates to marketing and branding, I think a lot of companies have always struggled with, how do we do it? What's the right way to do it? How do we know it's effective? And I think because of all those variables that sometimes they perceive to be difficult to quantify, they've shied away from it, or they've tried to do it on the cheap, whether it's just doing it in-house and not really consulting with professionals. And I think one of the things that has become apparent what made me think about that is the stories that were being told and the different ways that people are now being forced to market is they realize that we don't have the expertise nor the resources nor the technology to do it. So I really have seen more and more people who are starting to engage more directly with marketing professionals to really truly help them cohesively and comprehensively build that brand and come up with a coherent and consistent strategy, as we come out of the pandemic here, and really understanding, I think maybe more so now than ever, the value of branding and marketing, and more importantly, doing it with a professional.
Great comments. Yeah. We've had a series of podcasts to date and kind of talking about kind of changes that needed to occur. And the word that I always pops in my mind, and I think you guys sort of worked around it perfectly, is the word resilience, right? I mean, when you're faced with adversity, business people are driven and they are motivated to succeed, and faced with changing variables, you have to adjust, and that's resiliency. And I think it's described really well, and sounds like it's happening. Sara, this question's to you. I'm a finance guy, and so how do you see clients tackling the need of reporting kind of the return on their investment?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is I'm glad we're kind of seeing less businesses rely on just asking their customer when they walk in the door, "Hey, how'd you hear about us?" Right? That's probably the most unreliable way to go about business, because as we were talking about, there's so many marketing channels, and most businesses are using more than one marketing channel. So unless you're strictly sticking to one, that's the only place you're advertising, even that, it's going to be unreliable, because your customer is going to think they heard you from someplace and they didn't. Certainly over the last couple of years, there's been a drive more towards getting reporting and measuring return on investment and stuff, because a lot of the digital tools that people are using are more measurable than some of the more traditional tools that exist. But when we're talking about business owners and people like that, you can't expect them to know everything about what they're seeing, right? That's why you do, as we were talking about, more businesses are relying on experts to take them through that journey of understanding the reporting, understand the return on investment, which when you're looking at your marketing and where you're putting your dollars, but also your time, right? If you're doing seminars, are you getting something out of that? What is your goal, right? Set your goals from the beginning and try to stick with them. What do you really realistically want to see for return on investment. And then make sure, if you know that outcome and what you're looking to achieve, make sure the reporting that you're getting and things you're measuring actually relate to that. Because I feel I'm, kind of a detailed person. I like numbers and I like spreadsheets. I think a lot of people can, get, paralysis by analysis, right? Where you don't know what to do because there's so much information there. If you focus on the more important aspects and the things that really matter to you for your business to grow, then I think that makes it easier then to determine what channels you're going to use for marketing, where you need to reach your customers. All of that can be determined and can be adjusted based on the information that you're seeing from your reporting.
Great points. Ed, do you think companies are investing more money than they did 10 years ago? How about 10 months ago?
So I think Sara made a great point about people resources, and we have to think of those as the same as money. And in our business structure, deploying our team is money out of a company, but it's basically to buy more human capital to get more things done, and so forth. So I think of that question in both ways in that. And I feel proportionally, there's probably not been a large change in that. I think as companies get bigger, they spend more. As they, if they stay small, they spend about the same amount of time. I don't feel that there's been a significant change in the percentage of, say, a company's budget that is going to marketing, unless except for exceptions, a new product launch, new acquisition, et cetera. And so forth. But I think the real key is how that money is being spent. And we have almost a daily conversation about the old Mad Men days of working versus non-working dollars. And the reality is, and our belief is, you can't use those terms no longer have much relevance unless you redefine them. There's a lot more work that goes into marketing your brand and spend that is not just purchased media. And with all the new technologies, all the ways to get your brand out there, and the need, as Sara said a couple times, of making sure that it all links together consistently, that takes a different kind of time and resources. And certainly there's I think a shift in a major shift in how those resources are spent, but probably at the end of the day, not that much in how much overall resources spent.
If I could build on that too, Ed and Sara, I think there's some things now today that are much easier to measure the ROI on. You can start a new ad campaign, you can see if sales go up. That's a pretty clear correlation between that. But if you're the president of a company, sometimes what's the value of putting a stake in the ground on what your core values are? What's the payoff on that? And you may know that it's the right thing to do, and that it's an aligning tool for your employees, but you might not get an immediate payoff. I mean, even the example of the dog food company, sending a bouquet of flowers, you're probably not going to get a payoff on that right away. But in the long run, they're building equity in their brand. So there's always a balance. I think the ROI is really critical. But if that's all you look at, as a marketing guy, Mark, my job is often to get the finance guys to realize the value of the long-term investment. So I always make a play for that.
When we're looking at those kind of activities and campaigns, I agree, Fritz. There are soft and there are hard measurements. There are subjective and there are objective measurements. And I think for us, we've learned, or I've always said, the key is to determine before you open the gate, what will those measurements be? How will we know if we're successful? And if they're subjective and soft, like it contributes to our brand value, it's okay for that to be a measurement. If you say, okay, in 2 months, will we feel better about the work that we put out there or the product that we put out there? And if you've said at the beginning that that's success to you, it should be considered success. I know none of us want to be in the situation of saying, oh, well, we didn't get the the numbers to meet the bottom line, but didn't you feel good about it? Well, after the fact, if that's what you're saying, that does seem a little suspicious that maybe it wasn't really achieving what you intended to. And so I think really understanding what you want to accomplish before you start it is critical.
And I think that relates too with, there's a difference between a branding campaign, which is more long term, and you don't necessarily see immediate results from that. So setting your goals and expectations is going to vary significantly based on the tactic you're using, but what you're trying to get out of that as well. So branding is going to probably take longer if you have immediate sales or things that you have going on that you need immediate people through the doors. Obviously, you're going to measure that differently than you would if it's a longer term thing.
Well, those are great comments and a little bit of a segue to my next question, Fritz, and it goes to you. Talk about branding and its role in attracting and retaining employees. Is there a correlation, and what's important to consider in that regard?
Yeah, that's never been more important. We've worked with a large energy company on a major rebranding project, and it was led by the HR director. And a part of that, I think if you talked to him, he saw it as much as a culture change project as a rebranding project, because they really wanted to attract the very best talent to their company. And so it was, partly it was an external communication exercise, but as every bit as much of an internal exercise. And it was making sure that the culture was moving in the direction that they wanted to go so they could attract the right people. I think there was a time when companies could say, maybe tell a story about themselves that wasn't completely true. And I think those days are gone. Imagine you work today in a big glass building and that the consumer can see everything that you're doing inside, and they know it through social media. They know everything that you're doing. So it really today, branding has become, who you are and how you behave and how your employees behave is so critical. So there's a huge link. I saw a study recently on what a brand believes, or what a company believes is of equal importance to how well the brand performs, if you can imagine that. So it's not just about cranking out a good product, but it's about putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what our company believes. It's why Patagonia shuts down on Black Friday, because they say you should go outside and enjoy the outdoors, because that's what we believe in. That's really what we stand for. So it's critical. I think the HR folks and the marketing folks should be connected at the hip when thinking about how do we tell our story, because it's an internal and an external story.
It isn't part of telling that story the why of why they do what they do, and why they're so passionate about it.
Absolutely. And Tom, this as a longtime member of United Way. United Way for many years sort of wanted to be, the good force within the community, but they didn't want to offend people. They didn't want to take a stand that was too controversial, because your funders on the left and your funders on the right might be offended by the stand that you take. And those days are gone too. You have to take a stand, and United Way fortunately can take a stand that they really want to tackle the toughest challenges that we have in Dane County, and go at the core of the problem. That's a position that most people can get behind. But they've started. United Way is now not just being neutral like Switzerland. They're actually taking a stand, and they're looking at public policy, and how they can play a role in public policy as well.
Tom, how should companies be thinking about branding and marketing in the midst of a pandemic, but also when we emerge from that pandemic?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think there's a huge opportunity, because there was so much learned during all of this in terms of to the points were made before about their own company, their employees, what they did during the pandemic for their customers, for their employees. There's a huge opportunity to leverage that going forward as it relates to what your brand is and what's important to you as a company, and what your culture really is. And I also think that, it would maybe a little contrarian right now, when maybe things are still kind of tight from a dollars perspective, but some of this is a race too, where you want to be out front. You want to be the one that's doing this now. If you wait till the time is right, you're probably going to miss the opportunity to really emerge as a leader in your industry and as a segment. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity right now for people to emerge as, as the cream of the crop from the phoenix from the ashes, if you will. But you want to be first. You don't want to be last and just like everybody else. I mean, I think you have the opportunity to really set the stage and raise the bar as to who's going to be an industry leader, and that's going to require some confidence and some investment to do that.
I would just add on to that. There are a few things that happen in the world that strip people as a whole down to raw emotional concern. And the pandemic is one of them. In my lifetime, perhaps the other one that comes to mind would be September 11th. But when we all as people are so raw and exposed emotionally, as I said before, we are craving, we are eager, we are like pathetically looking for things that we can cling on to. And as Tom said, your brand needs to be one of those first pillars and rocks that they can emotionally start rebuilding. You can't wait until you find out where they end up in their journey coming out, because someone else will have already taken advantage of that. So you need to take great care of your good customers so that they know that you're there. It's also a great time to be ahead of your competitors if they're not there when their customers that have been loyal to them really need someone to trust, whether it's a simple food product that you just rely on or a service orientation. We are all emotionally raw and bare right now, and we need brands to build around us and feel like they're part of our lives as well. And there's no better time to do that than right now while we're all looking for that.
And I'll say too, when it comes down to being emotional and raw, I think the challenging part is going to be that we're all that way in different ways. So, looking at my, coworkers and other people that I know, some are extremely anxious to, go to restaurants, get into, businesses and do different things. I'm much, much more reserved than that. And my family is. So I think it's going to be a challenge because you're going to need to address, safety moving forward, especially with the vaccination. How are you going to address safety moving forward and help those customers that are still really nervous and scared to, be social again? I mean, it's a really interesting time. And so there's going to be various types of customers that you're going to deal with. And I think safety and talking about that and understanding that's going to be really important.
Yeah, great point. So this is for all of the panelists. For the business owner that's out there, not certain if they are doing the right things, what's the one bit of advice you have for them? And Sara, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think one of the things we haven't covered much of is investment level and not spreading a budget too thin, right? When you're investing in a tactic, I think it's important to be fully committed to that. And if it's only one tactic, because that's all that you can afford right now, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're actually investing in it, you're committed to it. Don't start adding more. Don't, just kind of dip your toe here and dip your toe there, because you're kind of, you're not going to see the results that you expect. And then you're going to think that tactic or, marketing, doesn't work, which isn't necessarily fair if you haven't invested what it takes into it. So don't spread the budget too thin. Make sure you're committed to what you're doing and then add on.
Ed?
Well, I think Sara made two great points in the previous question and this one of the audiences that you're trying to reach, the customers, et cetera, that you're trying to reach are going to be in very different states and adoption of coming back, whatever it may be. And your resources will only go so far. Fritz mentioned before the advice of looking at customer journeys and so forth. And I equate that to work that we also do with customer journeys. And you're going to have to kind of prioritize which customers at what stage of the journey is your priority, and your resources should match that. But at the end of the day, I guess my one piece of advice is be authentic to what your business is. I believe that you can be much more efficient with your dollars if you're authentic, because first of all, you're not having to market around who you are or create an impression of something that you're not. There's that saying, it's easy to remember what you said if you tell the truth. That applies also for how you position your brand. I think if you are authentic, you can build upon that. Every dollar, every hour put into that is built towards something greater when you're authentic. And I think that's just a great way. And that is what I think every human being is looking for right now, are people and brands to be authentic for them.
Good. Fritz, how about you?
Well, I would underscore what Sara and Ed said. Focus and be authentic are really, really important. It seems to me that the underlying common denominator from this entire discussion, though, today was really about be human. And there's probably no more important time than now to be human. People are, as Ed said, your emotions are raw. They're feeling new emotions, and a brand that can really connect now in an emotional way is going to win in the long run. I mean, your head follows your heart. So if you win their heart, you're going to win their head eventually. But I know one thing that I always think about is, if you're really facing a tough decision as a company president, sometimes the best thing to do is to bring the consumer into it, bring your customer into it. And it's easy to do that these days. It's cheap and easy and quick. You can do a quick survey. You can test a concept quickly without developing the product all the way. So in our companies, the consumer always wins. If you have two points of view and two parties arguing for two different directions, take it to the consumer, because to me that's a really critical thing to do. And today it's easy to do that, easy and fast.
Thanks, Tom. You get the last shot.
Get the last word. Oh, that's dangerous. Given all the things that we as bankers saw companies and individuals do during the pandemic, I guess the one piece of advice that I would give people is celebrate. I mean, it's been nothing short of amazing to see the things that we've seen and the way companies have treated their employees, looked out for their employees, looked out for their customers, and how they've pivoted and adapted and persevered through all this. I mean, it's nothing short of amazing. And I think that's there again. There's some great opportunities here for some storytelling that will strengthen that brand and reinforce the authenticity of what they're all about. Because at the end of the day, it's really all about the people that are delivering the product and service. And these people clearly are passionate about what they do and what they've done. And it's nothing short of amazing and should be celebrated.
Thanks. Well, this has really been an all-star conversation. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences today. And to all of you, our audience, thanks for listening to this conversation. We hope you found it useful and applicable in your own business. If you'd like to learn more, please let your First Business Banker make that connection for you. And finally, let us know if there are additional topics you'd like to hear about. And please join us next time on the First Business Bank podcast.
If you want more content like what you just heard delivered straight to your inbox, go to firstbusinessbankpodcast.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the First Business Bank podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a quick rating of the show. Thanks so much for listening. First Business Bank, member FDIC.